Hi, Luke Raymond here from Inaxsys Security System. Today's topic is how to choose the proper VMS and whether or not a VMS is really right for you. We're also going to talk about when you're creating VMS applications, what to do, what not to do, and the things to look out for. So let's take a look at this. The first thing to consider, and there's a top 5 for me, but the first thing and the most important for me is whether or not a VMS is even the right solution for your application. In this case, size really does matter. If I'm just going to do a small little application, 12, 16, 24, 36 cameras, generally speaking, I prefer to use individual NVRs because a lot of the basic features and some of the more advanced features that you traditionally would only find in VMSs, video management solutions, are now traditionally available or presently available in standard NVRs, or at least higher end NVRs. For example, at Inaxsys, we have our entry-level NVRs, but we also have what's called AI NVRs, which have a lot of the artificial intelligence features built into them that traditionally we would only have in a VMS like Archive. So when choosing whether or not to use a VMS, size matters big time. So if you're only doing a smaller application, call it maybe up to 64 cameras. Some people, as of 32 cameras, will move up to a VMS, some people 64, some people 128. But whatever your choice is, once you get past a certain point where you start to have too many independent NVRs, that's when choosing a VMS might be a better solution. It adds a lot more robustness to the hardware because you can design the server to meet the application, one. Two, you're not having multiple different hardwares. So traditionally when we're doing NVRs, well, if we have a 16-channel NVR and put a second one for 32, and a third one and a fourth one to get to 64, eventually it becomes unmanageable. And even if you're using larger NVRs, such as a 32 or a 64 channel, generally speaking, the processors in them are not really designed to do high frame rates and high resolutions at the full number of cameras. So you get to a breaking point where when you're designing the application, it makes more sense to, instead of doing multiple NVRs, go towards that VMS. So size is the first choice on whether or not to even use an NVR versus a VMS. The second thing that I usually look at when choosing a VMS is whether or not it is open source. What I mean by open source is the ability to integrate other manufacturers' products into it. Now, some manufacturers, when they build VMSs, they force you to use their cameras. So if you're going to use my VMS, well, my VMS is powerful, but you have to use my cameras. I'm a believer in the open source format. Now, our VMS called Archive is completely open source. There are over 10,000 natively integrated IP cameras, IP recorders, or analog recorders built into Archive. Now, the advantage of this is, let's say for argument's sake, you're doing a multi-site application. Well, there is the possibility to use an NVR per site and tie them all in together and log into the NVRs independently or maybe multiple at a time. But in the case of Archive, we could put the NVRs in, or we could even have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sites, all maybe that were installed some today, some a year ago, some 10 years ago, with different manufacturers of NVRs. So even if I have 100 different manufacturers of NVRs and DVRs, I can learn them into Archive and have them all act as if it's one big system. So this makes us basically agnostic. If you have an application where you want to use, sure, our Legend cameras or our Storm cameras for most of them, but then there's one specific location in your application where you need a specialty camera from another manufacturer. Well, the advantage of Archive is that you're not stuck just using my cameras. You can use any manufacturer's IP cameras or recorders and bring them into the Archive architecture. Now, when you're doing a multi-site application, which has traditionally been, for example, a chain of stores which had NVRs and DVRs were installed for the past 10, 15 years, the ability to leave the hardware there and bring it all in and have one platform, Archive, logging into all these disparate systems, that's a really powerful tool. So my number 2 choice is really open source. Is it open source or is it not? In our case, Archive 100% is. For me, the number 3 feature is the actual AI features built in or not built in to your VMS. Some VMSs require a third-party software. For example, you'll buy the VMS and you'll pay a cost per license per camera, or maybe a license fee per server, or maybe both. But then the moment you want to add artificial intelligence features, such as license plate recognition or facial recognition or fire detection or any of the higher level artificial intelligence features, there's going to be a third-party software from another manufacturer, or maybe it's from the same manufacturer, but it's an additional license you have to buy. So those features and the cost to add them on, or the no cost to add them on in some cases, is really a deciding factor for me. If I'm going to choose a VMS, I'm going to want to incorporate those features because they make my life easier when I'm doing searches. They make or eliminating false alarms so much better. And that facility of removing those false alarms and making searching easier, it makes the end user's life that much better and that much easier to do their job. The second part of that is the cost. Well, if it's a third-party manufacturer that is not traditionally designed to buy the same manufacturer as the VMS, well, now it's two different platforms trying to speak to each other. In the case of Archive, we've built in all these advanced features directly into Archive. There's no additional license fee necessary unless you're doing real-time facial recognition searches, approved listing or denied listing. Some of the applications have an extra license, but it's a one-time license only. All of the entry-level and even mid-range artificial intelligence features, such as license plate or facial recognition searches, are built into Archive with no additional licensing required. So from that perspective, choosing the right VMS for your application partially means is your application? What type of AI features are you looking for, and how much is it going to cost you to get them? My fourth piece to choosing a VMS actually ties directly into number 3. It's a question of cost. You see, there's something called software maintenance agreements. Some manufacturers who do VMSs only do VMSs. And part of the way that they make money is to add a software maintenance agreement. What this means is that they charge you the upfront cost for the license, and every additional year that you have that license, if you want to maintain the license, as in keep it up to date, you have to pay an additional fee as of year 2 and year 3 and year 4 for the rest of your life. Now, this can add up very, very quickly. If the system costs, let's say, $100,000 up front, and over the next 5 years you have to spend another $100,000 just to maintain it, that becomes incredibly cost prohibitive. When we refer to Archive, Archive has no SMAs. The upfront license that you buy is the cost. That's it. All future upgrades are included in that price. And the reason for this is because we as a manufacturer, we don't just develop the Archive software, we also have the hardware and we have the servers. And because we're able to balance our costing, we're able to offer all these upgrades free of cost. Or rather, it's built into the cost when you get there. Now, these SMAs can be really, really cost prohibitive. And the longer the system is deployed, the more important that cost is, or the larger that cost is. Now, some people say to themselves, well, I don't care, I never need to update it. And that is a valid argument. The problem with that is that over time, cameras can and will become defective. Well, one of these updates that happen with SMAs is the addition of new cameras, new feature sets. Maybe there's a new artificial intelligence feature that's added. Maybe there's a new model of camera that comes out. And your software, if it's 4 years old, is not compatible with that newer camera. All of a sudden, one of your cameras dies. Guess what? You have no choice. Now you have to pay the SMA for all the backed years with other manufacturers. In the case of Archive, we've always got you covered because you're always getting the free upgrade. For me, the least important and the last point in choosing a VMS is actually the cost of the software itself. Because once I've decided, okay, I'm going to have a VMS. I have a big enough size of application. I know I want an open source. I've decided exactly what cameras I want for the application. I've decided on the AI features that best suit my needs and how to get them incorporated. And I've said, well, you know what? I want an SMA or I don't want an SMA. Lastly is the actual cost of the software itself. Because once I've just chosen all of these features, the cost then the number of options I have from manufacturers is reduced. So now it becomes a question of, okay, with the few choices I have left, what is the cost per channel? As in, with Archive, we charge you 1 fee per camera. The more cameras you have, well, you pay that fee for the number of cameras. In some cases, you're going to want more higher end applications, such as approved listing and denied listing. Well, in that case, it's an extra license for the number of cameras you need, because not every single one is going to do that. Sometimes you're going to want real-time facial recognition searches. You want to make sure that the license plate of the car, as soon as it drives into your parking lot, creates an active alarm. Well, that's an extra license, but only on the cameras you need it. Once you've seen all of this application, you've designed the application correctly, you now then price it out based upon your real world needs. But again, that for me is the last choice. Now, over and above all of these 5 choices in choosing a VMS, to me what is most important, with the one thing you really got to look out for, is the actual proper design of the system. Because when designing a system, a VMS system, it is very important to get it right. I don't know how many times I've seen applications where the customer says, okay, I've chosen my VMS, I've chosen my cameras, I'm going to install all the cameras, I install everything, and then it turns out that they choose a switch which can't handle the load of data. All of a sudden they've chosen an inferior switch and they wonder why cameras keep dropping off the network. Or they put really good switches, Cisco Catalyst series switches, they spend a fortune on them, but then the server is a low-end server. All of a sudden the network interface card on the server can't take the amount of traffic coming into it and it keeps crashing. Or the video card is not properly designed. Or there's not enough hard drive to get the amount of recording they need for the number of cameras they need at the resolution they need and the frame rate they needed. It's a little complicated, but designing the proper system, choosing the right server, building it correctly, choosing the right switches, making sure that the backbone on those switches is strong enough and the individual ports going out to the cameras is strong enough, and you have enough power, PoE, in those switches. And over and above all of that, making sure that the cabling you choose, connecting all of this, is the correct cabling for the application. And I mean, of course, Cat5 from a camera to a switch is perfectly fine. But doing a backbone in Cat6 because you want 1 gig, or even better, fiber optic cables, well, that's a great choice as well. What if you need wireless bridges? Designing the whole application is probably the most important piece of this to get it working correctly. Here at Inaxsys Security Systems, we are a professional company with professional trained people. We are able to design. We've got people with networking degrees. We've got tons of people with access control experience and server experience, building servers, and video experience. We put all of these expertise together and we help our customers to design the solutions from top to bottom. And that's one of the things that we offer as a service, free of charge. If you come to us with an application, we'll help you to build the server, to choose the right switches, we'll inform you of the backbones you need, we'll help you build the cameras. We will do the design legwork for you as much as we possibly can to ensure that your applications are done properly the first time. That way we have no mistakes after the fact. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the section below or reach out to us at www.inaxsys.com. Cheers.